Chapter 33 of The Tale of the Hemisphere, Chile and Argentina, by Frank G. Carpenter. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Terrible Locust. The locust is the terror of the Argentine farmer. It afflicts him even as it afflicted Pharaoh when he hardened his heart and would not let the Israelites go at the command of Moses. The chief difference is that Pharaoh had the plague for only a season, while the Argentinians have often to suffer for several years in succession. The locusts that spread over Egypt sailed in on an east wind. Those that cover Argentina fly down from the north, and like their sisters of Egypt, they come in such swarms that they cover the face of the sun, and darkness falls on the land. They eat all the vegetation, and when they depart, there remains not any green thing in the trees or in the herbs of the field, throughout all the land that they cover. I talked with one entomological expert who went to Argentina from the United States and has made an exhaustive study of this pestiferous grasshopper. He says that the Bible description of the plague is not overdrawn. With the exception of the paradise tree, the locusts destroy every green thing. They eat the crops from the fields and chew up the grass. They clean the fruit trees of their leaves and eat off the bark to the wood. Orchards are to be seen where the oranges still hang on the branches, although not a leaf is left. The locusts will go into a cornfield and strip the leaves from the stalks, and if the corn is small, they may eat it down to the ground. They hang to the branches of trees like bees when swarming, and the boughs often break with their weight. During a tour up the Rio de la Plata, I saw fields that had been devastated by locusts, and I heard from Dr. Habnicht, one of a colony of Seventh-day Adventists from the United States, that the hoppers frequently strip large trees of their bark, leaving nothing but the white skeletons. Where they attack ripe fruit, one may see the peach stones still hanging and the bark of the tree completely taken away. They mow the grass from the ground and cut the wheat in the fields so that the earth looks as though it were burnt. In places they cover the ground to a depth of 2 or 3 inches, hopping one over the other in their fight for food. The size of the swarms varies. Sometimes they may cover but a few acres. At others they may blacken the land for many square miles. Railroad trains at times pass for more than an hour through a cloud of locusts extending far out on both sides of the cars and almost 200 feet high. They are not in one solid mass, and as they fly they look like a snowstorm, their transparent wings catching the sun and having the appearance of snowflakes. They usually stop overnight. A swarm about to settle down is tremendously thick, and may be 2,000 feet wide, 50 feet high, and a mile long. It is so black that it looks like a storm cloud. After they get their wings, the adult locusts usually fly high enough not to affect the movement of the train, but while they are still in the hopper stage, they may crawl in bands over the tracks, and the cars crush them, making the rails so greasy that the wheels will not take hold, but fly round and round while the cars stand still. In such cases, 2 of the brakemen often sit on the cowcatcher, holding brooms on the rails to brush off the pests as the cars move. Sometimes they have to sand the rails. The young wingless locusts are more voracious than when they are fully grown. These insects are very much like our grasshoppers, but about twice as large. Their general color is grayish-red, and they look like small birds as they fly through the air. They are not dangerous to man, but when they fly low and hit one in the face, it is annoying. The insects are prolific, and a great part of the damage is caused not by the grown-ups, but by the babies. As they move over the country, the females bore holes in the ground with their tails and lay eggs. Each female will lay a bag of from 50 to 100 eggs, and a month or so later these will have hatched out into young locusts, which crawl out after a rain and begin their devastating march. They crawl and hop over the ground, consuming everything as they grow. They keep on crawling until their wings grow. They advance in great hordes, climbing fences and entering the houses. Dr. Habnicht told me that they ate the lace curtains from his windows, and that they sometimes attack babies and bite them until the blood runs. As soon as their wings grow, they fly away. No one knows where the pests come from. Some say they are from Brazil, some from Bolivia, some from Paraguay and the Argentine Chaco. The Argentinians know that they come from the north and northwest and travel as far south as the provinces of Salta and Jujuy and the territories of Formosa and Chaco. After a time there are other swarms, formed by the young hatched from eggs left by the first hordes, and as the weather grows warmer there are still other hosts until the whole territory is overrun. August and September are the season for them. When the weather begins to get colder, they start north again. Entomologists think that the only way to combat the pests is by going to the country of their origin and studying their life history there. It is fighting in the dark to use only the feeble remedies possible after the swarms descend upon the land. Argentina has long had laws for the extermination of locusts, and the government spends from $1 to $5 million a year for this purpose. They are attacked in the swarms, in the egg, and when traveling as young over the country. They are caught in bags and cloths during the hours of low temperature and destroyed. The places where they settle are fired, and where they have laid their eggs the whole zone is often plowed up. In other places the eggs are dug up with picks, and if the ground is wet, animals are driven over the soil to destroy them. In some sections the government pays 15 or 20 cents a sack, and a man may make $15 a night catching locusts. It is not uncommon to have 500 wagon loads of sacked locusts brought to one of the receiving stations in a single day. The sacking is usually during the mating season, when they do not fly. Another method of protecting the grain fields is to surround them with little fences of tin or sheet iron. These fences may be 18 inches or 2 feet in height, but it is impossible for the young locusts to crawl over them. They will come in battalions to a fence and then travel along it in both directions. At every 300 feet, holes about a yard deep are dug, and these are so bordered with tin that the insects drop into the holes and cannot get out. The Agricultural Department has spent millions of dollars for such means of defense, and has on hand enough of such barriers to reach halfway around the world. There are also other locust traps. In places the crawlers are scooped up with scrapers and killed, and attempts have been made to destroy them with solutions of kerosene, arsenic, and creosote. Another insect pest is the ant. There is one species that is not much bigger than the head of a large pin, but it exists in such numbers that the damage is enormous. It attacks the sugar cane and cotton. It bites its way into the oranges, and it crawls into the houses. It likes to work in the dark, and no place is safe from its attack. In some sections the bedposts rest in bowls of water or on panes of glass coated with Vaseline, and I am told that mothers have been forced to take their babies from their cradles and dip them in water to clean off the ants. The little insects are so small that they get into the mouth and nostrils, and there are reports of babies having been killed by them. The Argentine ant has caused trouble in the United States. These ants have been carried by ships to our Gulf Coast, and for a time there were so many in New Orleans that they became known as the New Orleans ant. They are also found in Southern California. End of chapter 33. Chapter 34 of The Tale of the Hemisphere, Chile and Argentina, by Frank G. Carpenter. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The world's second sheep country. As a sheep country, Argentina has unrivaled possibilities. Already she has more than 80 million sheep, or about 10 to each inhabitant, and there's opportunity for still greater expansion. The Mercado Central de Frutos of Buenos Aires is the largest wool market of the world. In connection with Bahia Blanca, the great port of southern Argentina, it handles practically all of the wool grown in the republic. The market is owned by a stock company, which has frequently paid dividends of from 13 to 15%. There are acres of buildings. The main structure is of brick, with a vast iron roof supported by thousands of iron pillars. The Mercado Central, which I have visited, is on the banks of the Riachuelo River, surrounded by a network of railways so placed that freight can come in by boat and car from different parts of the republic and go out on ocean vessels to all parts of the world. Hundreds of millions of pounds of hides, grain, skins, and wool are handled here each year. At shearing time the wool comes in by trainloads and shiploads. There are not enough cars to handle the clip, and the vast market is so packed that you can hardly get through it. 3 floors are stacked high with bales of dirty, greasy wool. The streets are jammed with carts and wagons heaped with it. Much of the loading and unloading is done with hydraulic cranes, so that a great part of the clip goes from the cars and ships direct to its place in the market. Each man's consignment is in a pile by itself, in such form that the buyers can make easy examination. The wool is sold unwashed. 50% of weight is said to be lost in the cleaning process, and the exporters prefer that the wool cross the ocean in an unwashed state. The clip contained so much grease that when I thrust my hand into one of the bales it came out shining as though I had dipped it in Vaseline, and I had to put on a cotton coat to save my clothes from stains. The Argentine wool clip is growing in value. The quantity is not so great as in the past, but the quality is improving and the yield per sheep is increasing. Owing to the improvement from importing fine stock, the average fleece is now 1/3 larger than in 1860. Next to Australia, Argentina is the world's largest sheep producer, but in spite of the great demand for wool and sheepskins and frozen mutton, which was created by the war and which still continues, the actual number of sheep did not increase much. One reason is said to be the amount of care required to raise sheep successfully, compared with cattle raising or farming. In many places the estancias have for years been carrying flocks as large as they could profitably manage. The less settled provinces have been producing more and the older sections less wool than before the war. The world's production of wool and mutton just about balances the demand, and the Argentine farmer is apt to rest content with the profit of the day without making an intensive effort to increase the possibilities of future gain. He does not as a rule appreciate the fact that eternal vigilance is the price of profit. The Argentine wool is inferior in quality to that grown in Australia, and only by constant importation of first-class stock can the quality and quantity be kept up to a high standard. With nature's abundant gifts of suitable grazing land and every possible advantage of climate, the Argentinians should not fall behind in developing this great source of revenue. In Buenos Aires province, the sheep are kept in fenced enclosures. In the south they are herded in flocks of several thousand. No artificial feeding is done. Like other livestock, the sheep live out of doors from one year's end to another. There are no sheds, barns, or stacks of hay in that region. The animals wander off in the morning, grazing in the direction whence the wind blows, and return in the evening to sleep about the huts of the shepherds. It is only where the grass is plentiful that the fields are fenced with wire. Since close grazing betters the grasses, a farm is improved by the keeping of sheep. The herder may work for monthly wages, or he may herd on shares for 1/4 of the profit. His life is dreary in the extreme. His only home is a mud hut away out on the prairie. His only companions are the sheep, his horse, and his dogs. His chief food is mutton, as his employer allows him to kill enough sheep to supply himself with meat. The first sheep brought to Argentina came from the West Indies. They were descended from flocks brought to Santo Domingo by Columbus and other navigators. From that island they were taken to Jamaica, Cuba, and Puerto Rico, and thence made their way south to the Rio de la Plata. In 1550 some were brought to Tucuman, in northern Argentina, and later others were driven over the Andes from Chile. The Chilean sheep also are said to have originated from the Santo Domingo flocks, which came not from Spain but from the Canary Islands. If this be true, practically all of the sheep of Latin America had their origin in the Canaries. By inbreeding for hundreds of years, the native sheep became smaller, their wool grew hard and short, and they looked like goats. It was not until other importations were made that the flocks began to improve. An American consul named Halley, who represented us at Buenos Aires at the beginning of the last century, did much to introduce fine breeds into Argentina, but little attention was paid to the importation of fine stock until about 1862. After that, Merinos were imported, and a little later Southdowns and others. I saw on the San Juan estancia A Southdown flock descended from rams and ewes imported 80 years ago, about which same time Rambouillets and Blackfaces were also introduced. Only recently has mutton brought a good price in the local markets. A generation ago sheep were so common that the beggars refused to eat mutton, and the only profit in sheep came from the wool. At an earlier time sheep were killed in great numbers without taking the trouble to shear them, the hides being allowed to rot so that the wool could be more easily plucked off. The bodies were then used as fuel for the brick kilns, and it is said that there are old churches in Buenos Aires built of bricks baked with sheep carcasses. At the beginning of the 19th century, the flocks were so numerous that sheep were sometimes sold for 6 cents apiece, and at one time they multiplied so rapidly that thousands of the older ones were driven over the rocks into the sea to get rid of them. At another period they were slaughtered for their tallow, a single sheep bringing as much as $1 for its fat. Before the white man came to South America, the sources of wool were the llamas, alpacas, vicuñas, and guanacos. These animals lived only in the highlands of the Andes. The vicuñas and guanacos ran wild, as they do now, and every year the Incas had a great hunt, during which they killed thousands of them and dried the meat. The wool was shorn and stored in the imperial depots. Argentina was the first country to export frozen meat of any kind to England. The first shipments were on account of the foot and mouth disease, which led to embargoes to keep the live cattle and sheep out of the United Kingdom. It was not until 1885 that the industry was definitely established. Today, the business done in frozen mutton alone amounts to $5 or $6 million a year. The mutton and lamb are exported in whole carcasses, weighing from 30 to 50 pounds each, for the English prefer the medium weights. I have been through a packing house at Buenos Aires, which has a capacity of 5,000 sheep a day. When I entered the killing room, the floor was covered with blood. There were 2,000 animals in the pens, and hundreds had been skinned and cleaned and hung up to cool before being put in the freezing rooms. I stopped for a moment and timed the killing. Within just 3 minutes I saw a sheep pass from its active bleeding life into a carcass, skinned and cleaned and ready to be frozen for its long voyage of 7,000 miles over the ocean to Europe. The killing was done in sight of the waiting victims, hundreds of which looked on while their brothers and sisters were slaughtered. Every pen had at least 50 sheep, and along the front on a bench as high as my knee lay rows of dying animals. Each had 2 great round holes in its white throat, out of which ran the red blood into a little canal below. Some were kicking, others were feebly groaning, but I could see that death was almost instantaneous. The killing is done with a long, double-bladed knife. The sheep is caught by 2 men, who throw it on its back upon a bench. While they hold it, the butcher seizes it by the chin, bends the head back, and with one thrust drives the knife into its throat, cutting the jugular vein. He goes on to the next, and keeps on killing like a veritable machine, butchering them at the rate of 1 or more per minute. As soon as the sheep is killed, it is disemboweled and skinned. The cleaned entrails go to Germany for the casings of sausages. The kidney fat is made into an oleomargarine used here for cooking, and the kidneys are sold in the markets of Buenos Aires. The tongues are frozen, the feet and head are cut off. The carcass is then dressed after the fashion most popular in England. There are London market men here to superintend this part of the work. The freezing is done in great chambers, each of which will hold 60,000 carcasses. These rooms have double walls of wood a foot thick, and their ceilings are covered with coils of pipes through which flow ammonia and brine, lowering the temperature to 30 degrees below zero. The coils were covered with frost an inch thick, and as I stood at one end of the room I could see 1,000 freezing carcasses hanging from the hooks in the ceiling. They were almost ready for shipment, and when my guide lifted one to show it to me, I found that its flesh was as hard as stone, and that it would stand alone. That carcass had been in the room 48 hours. Before shipping, the dressed sheep is sewed up in fine white muslin cloth. Then comes the cold storage chamber of the steamers, where the temperature is almost as low as that of the freezing rooms, and then the Liverpool or London market. End of chapter 34. Chapter 35 of The Tale of the Hemisphere, Chile and Argentina, by Frank G. Carpenter. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Condor and the Ostrich. In the mountain regions, one of the enemies of the sheep herder is the condor, the eagle of the Andes. As these birds will attack any of the animals of the high Andes, especially if it be sick or wounded, the shepherds have to watch to keep them away from the sheep. I have seen the condors in the mountains. They fly higher than any other bird. Their favorite breeding places are 2 or 3 miles above the sea. They may often be seen among the snows. I photographed a half dozen in the zoo at Lima, Peru, and it seemed to me that they were about the ugliest birds in the whole aviary. Their heads and necks had no feathers, and they looked like the gigantic vultures they are. The male condors have combs of bright red and a frill of white feathers at the base of their long, skinny necks. The rest of the plumage is black. These birds are sometimes compared with the eagle, but they are nothing like eagles in appearance and habits. They eat carrion, and if a llama or an alpaca lies dead in the mountains, one may see them swooping down upon the carcass. When they find meat, they gorge themselves, and as they become stupid from overeating, they are then easily caught and killed. The condor is not seen on the pampas, although there are many vultures of other kinds there and in other parts of Argentina. Another pest of the pastoral districts is the carancho, a comparatively small bird of a dark brown color with a light band across its wings. It makes me think of a cross between a vulture and a hawk. It eats only carrion, but will attack lambs and pick out their eyes. I am reminded of the kea, the famous sheep-eating parrot of New Zealand, which has a way of fastening its claws in the wool and then tearing a hole in the live sheep to get at the kidneys. About the most interesting of the large birds of Argentina is the rhea, or South American ostrich. They are found in great numbers running over the pampas, and there are thousands of them in Patagonia. I have seen them from the car windows and have watched them hunted in the desert, where they squat down and hide their heads in the sand. As they are of the same gray color as the bushes and bunches of scrub all around them, it takes a sharp eye to distinguish the birds from the bush. The ostrich has always been laughed at for this silly custom, but indeed there is nothing more cunning, as it ensures a degree of concealment that the bird could have in no other way. When the rhea stands up one can easily distinguish him, but when he squats down, with his head out of sight, he seems merely a bush. In walking, the ostrich keeps its wings closed and swings its neck backward and forward. In running, the wings are raised and the bare thighs show as it speeds along over the ground, skimming the air. On a charge, the wings are outspread and the head and neck are held down. It can frighten a horse, and when angry will attack a man upon horseback. The American ostrich has 3 toes, while the African has 2. Its foot is large and powerful. The American ostrich is smaller than the African, and its feathers do not compare with those of the latter, although they are gathered and sold. I have seen some made into rugs. They are likewise used for fly brushes and feather dusters. The plumes of the male are sometimes combined with the African feathers for hats and bonnets. The feathers are of different colors according to the parts of the body. Some are of rich brown and some black, but most of them are gray or a dirty white. The ostriches of Patagonia and the pampas move about in flocks, each consisting of a cock and a number of hens. Every cock has his own hens and will fight to the death any other cock that comes near them. The cock is a sort of sultan, and the hens seem to be the ladies of the harem who do his bidding. They lay their eggs in one nest, each hen giving her share, until 50 eggs may be there in a single hole in the sand. When the tale is complete, the cock takes charge and sits on the eggs, relieved now and then by a hen, as his lordship directs. He has to keep sitting for 5 or 6 weeks before the chicks hatch. Some of the ostrich eggs weigh 1.5 pounds, and it is not uncommon to have one served as an omelet when one stops overnight in camp. The cock objects to having any one touch the eggs, and if they are disturbed he will leave that nest and start another. I have heard a number of queer theories about how the cock raises his young. One of them tells how the first meal is gathered from an egg placed on the sand apart from the setting and several yards from the nest. The egg remains in the sun until the ostrich chicks come, by which time it is rotten. When the little chicks appear, the father goes to the egg and breaks it. It gives forth a horrible smell, which attracts the flies for miles around. The little ones eat the flies and thus have their first meal. The story is so interesting that I trust it is true. The father also assumes care of the young ostrich brood. He calls them to him with the peculiar booming sound to which the babies reply with a chirp. He keeps watch over them and shows fight if they are disturbed. At such times he will charge a dog or a man upon horseback, and if he can knock down his enemy he will kick and bite him. His kick is terrible, being sometimes strong enough to kill a dog or a man. Of late some of the estancieros have been introducing the African ostrich, which thrives well. End of chapter 35. Chapter 36 of The Tale of the Hemisphere, Chile and Argentina, by Frank G. Carpenter. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The National Sugar Bowl. Tucumán, the smallest province of the Argentine, is tucked away between the almost unknown Chaco and the seldom visited Andes district. It is more thickly populated than any other part of the republic. This is only comparative, however, and merely shows how scattered is the population of the whole land outside the cities. Three-quarters of Tucumán is mountainous, and its density of population is in the irrigated section around the city of the same name. Half of the cultivated land is planted in sugarcane, and of the whole sugar production of Argentina, this province alone supplies about 85%. There is plenty of land farther north suitable for the purpose, but it has only recently been put under cultivation. In Tucumán, the local government, backed by the national authorities, has experiment stations and farms not only for the improvement of the sugarcane output, but to encourage diversified crops. Once in a great while frosts occur severe enough to injure the cane, and a few such experiences have convinced the farmers that it is well not to have all their eggs in one basket. Two-thirds of the sugar mills of the country are in the province of Tucumán, so that it is in very fact Argentina's sugar bowl. The industry has expanded with the increase of demand from a growing population, and the product is used entirely for home consumption. If the crop falls short, sugar is imported, but the government protects the infant industry by a duty on foreign sugars. The Jesuits inaugurated sugar growing in Argentina as they did so much of its productive development, but when they were expelled, their lessons were forgotten, and not until 1840 was there again a sugar mill in the land. It was more than a generation later before there was any modern machinery or systematic production. The native cane has been superseded by a Java variety, which yields 3 times as much per acre under the best conditions, and is certain to be twice as productive. The capital and business center of the province is the city of Tucumán, numbering 90,000 inhabitants. It is one of the historic towns of the republic. In Buenos Aires was proclaimed Argentina's declaration of independence of Spain in 1810, and after years of fighting it was in Tucumán that the Treaty of Peace was signed and independence secured, July 9, 1816. The little cottage in which this took place, Casa Independencia, has been piously kept as a historic relic, but has been enclosed within a large and impressive modern edifice. One is expected to gaze with reverence on the chair occupied by the first president of the republic and at the bare room where the first Congress assembled. The old city has been much modernized. It claims, with Cordoba, the distinction of having much of the real old Spanish aristocracy of the country, and as a logical corollary boasts that its women are the most beautiful in South America. At the hour of evening promenade, the throng sauntering among the orange trees of the plaza, or studying shop windows are much more distinctly Spanish than are the crowds of Buenos Aires or Mar del Plata. The laborers in the cane fields are mainly native Indians or half-breeds. As elsewhere, whole families work together at the harvest time. The man, armed with a great knife, almost like a butcher's chopper, cuts off the stalk taller than himself near the root, swings it in the air, slashes off the leaves, and tosses it into the heap, which the women and children gather up and carry to the wagons. At the mill the usual process is followed, the first machine squeezing out from these stalks the muddy-looking juice, which is then cooked down and afterward treated with centrifugal motion in hot steel cups. The product, which looks at this stage like brown sand, needs more heat and refining processes to become white. Nothing yields a quicker return for capital invested than sugar growing on a large scale. In Tucuman, after the land is cleared and irrigation is provided, the first crop pays. For 3 or 4 years the roots will produce well, and then there must be a gradual replanting to ensure a steady yield. Careful weeding is necessary, and there are the contingencies of a locust visitation or a frost, but these are rare. Until a railroad connected Tucuman with the rest of Argentina, sugar growing was limited to the local needs. But as soon as it became possible to trade in the product, the industry grew by leaps and bounds. The discovery of gold could scarcely have caused more activity in the hitherto sleeping town. People from all sections and all professions flocked to Tucuman to make their fortunes in sugar, and every other form of production was neglected. The sugar industry is still making great progress. Argentine cotton might be made of recognized value in the world market, though it would require not only capital, but scientific management, trained labor, and patient waiting to put the country on the map as a cotton producer. Money can be made more quickly and easily in the long-established lines. The question of suitable labor would be especially difficult to meet. Cotton has been successfully grown in the Rio de la Plata region, but the natives thought themselves imposed upon unless they were paid tremendous wages, because the work of picking seemed to them extremely hard and required much more care and steady application than they were capable of giving. The fiber of Argentine cotton is considered of good grade, and the seeds yield an unusual amount of oil, but the cotton grower of today must be scientific and progressive to produce an article that will compete with the immensely improved varieties from the United States and Egypt. Tobacco is another staple product which Argentina might grow in greater abundance for her own consumption. It has been grown from very early times, chiefly in the provinces of Tucuman, Salta, and Corrientes, but never on a large scale. As the Argentine leaf is rather coarse, the better qualities of cigars and cigarettes come from other countries, but in a country with every natural advantage, it would seem that the $6 million or more spent on importing this luxury might be kept at home. It is rather surprising likewise to be told that Argentina imports large quantities of rice. A country of so many rivers has undoubtedly great tracts of land naturally suitable for rice cultivation or easily made so. It is equally surprising to learn that the rice imported comes mainly from Italy, with some from the United States. The Argentinians are and always have been a meat-eating people, and the cereals they produce are largely for export. But of late years the sale of meat products has been so profitable that the people are beginning to acquire the habit of eating more vegetable food. The Italian element naturally brings its racial custom of using meat sparingly, and in consequence there is said to be a demand for rice, which is not yet met by the domestic supply. The World War taught all nations the wisdom of self-dependence so far as possible in the matter of foodstuffs and raw materials for industries. There are such great natural diversities in climate and soil that no country can in this day become a hermit nation and continue to thrive. But a country so blessed by nature as the Argentine will always stand as a creditor nation in respect to a large share of the necessaries of life. It is a commentary on the motive of Spanish exploration and conquest that no land they discovered or colonized was considered of real value unless it gave promise of yielding gold or silver. All through the northern parts of South America They called each new region a land of gold, and the great river below Brazil they appeared to have called La Plata in the hope that it would lead them to a land of silver. The hope was destined to bitter disappointment, but the name was firmly fixed, and when the South American countries achieved independence from Spain, a large number of provinces were united under the name of the Republic of La Plata. For 50 years they were torn by local factions, the inland provinces united only by a common jealousy of Buenos Aires and its supremacy. Just about the beginning of our Civil War, the provinces finally split into the two republics of Uruguay and Argentina. The group of states known as Argentina still wished to keep its silvery name and formed the Argentine Republic. If the Spaniards had only realized it, here were gold and silver aplenty to be had with comparatively little effort from this great fertile country. End of chapter 36. Chapter 37 of The Tale of the Hemisphere, Chile and Argentina by Frank G. Carpenter. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Land Barons at the Seaside. Mar del Plata is the Palm Beach, the Newport, and the Atlantic City of this part of the world. It is 240 miles south of Buenos Aires, on one of the finest ocean strands on the globe. The city lies in a little valley, with the high ground all around it covered with magnificent villas. A wide boulevard commands ocean views for many miles. The town has fine houses, magnificent hotels, and a club that cost $1 million. There are extensive golf grounds, a race course where races are run almost daily, and an open camp where pigeon shooting is practiced. At the various clubs are tables for roulette and other gambling games, while in the casino one may lose or win a small fortune if he cares to bet on the turn of the wheel. The town is not at all like any of our seaside resorts, and we might copy many of its arrangements to good advantage. It is like a series of palaces. The Rambla, a wide promenade upon which the people stroll back and forth, is of artificial stone built in the lines of an ancient Greek temple, with an esplanade for about a mile around the chief bathing center. The temple is perhaps 30 or 40 feet high. It is a combination of Moorish and Grecian architecture, and rises in the shape of a half moon around a stretch of beautiful sand. The entrance of stone, upheld by stone columns, is magnificent, and through a grove of columns one passes on to the esplanade high above the beach. It is very wide, and is bordered by a stone balustrade fit for the palace of a king, quite unlike the boardwalks of Atlantic City or Asbury Park, which have along them a jumble of buildings both mean and splendid. At the rear of the Rambla is a long, arcaded structure about 15 feet wide, backed by the stores. It is paved with porcelain tiles and extends around the whole esplanade from one end to the other. The esplanade outside is 30 or 40 feet wide. At the ends of the arcades and in the middle are mosque-like domes of stained glass that blaze with electric lights during the evening. In front of the stores is another roofed promenade upheld by magnificent columns. Fronting upon this are the plate glass windows of the shops, which compare favorably with the best in New York, Paris, or London. Walking along the corridor is like going through the treasure vaults of a king. I doubt whether there is a richer place upon earth in proportion to its population than this little city. Most of its inhabitants are millionaire Argentinians, including many of the rich estancieros. If you could see the shops in the Rambla, it would remove from your mind any idea that South America is a part of the backwoods of the world, and therefore a market for the scrap and waste of factories in the United States. It would show you that the people demand the best of everything, and that they have the money to pay for what they want. In these shops are exhibited the latest models of fashion from Paris. In the jewelry shops are diamonds and pearls so finely set that a single ornament costs a king's ransom. I have never seen more magnificent jewelry. In one window are displayed diamond tiaras. In another there are solitaires as big as my thumbnail, and iridescent pearls twice the size of marrow-fat peas. There are emeralds and rubies of wonderful beauty, and many new and artistic combinations of precious stones. There are collars of emeralds and diamonds, in which the emeralds form the central row with diamonds of pure water above and below. There are similar collars of sapphires and rubies, and marvelous diamond knots and bracelets. The shops of this kind on the Rambla are nearly all branches of the large jewelry houses of Buenos Aires, Paris, and London. The confectioners display candy in caskets so beautifully inlaid that one may give his sweetheart a present worth many dollars, though the contents are simply sweets. Some of the bonbons are imported from Paris, and the boxes are of ivory, of embossed leather work, and of satin and silk. Even ordinary things are so put up that they cost a great deal. There are no cheap John shops with pinchbeck jewelry such as one finds in Atlantic City. The goods are for the rich, to whom price is no consideration. There are no marked prices in any of the shops, and you are expected to pay what is asked. Everything is high, but the purses of the visitors are long. Walking along the Rambla, one looks over the billows of the southern Atlantic rolling in. Down on the beach are hundreds of booths roofed with canvas. These are filled with people who sit and chat and have tea parties in sight of the surf. There are children playing outside, and in the ocean are bathers by hundreds. Indeed, the views on the beach are not very different from those of our seashore resorts. Both sexes go bathing together. In this land the people are devoted to pleasure. They get their fun, however, in a more refined way than many of our people do. Mar del Plata has none of the freakish costumes or overdressing of our seaside places. The bathing suits are usually black or dark blue and modest in cut. There is no conspicuous dressing either on the promenade or on the beach, and as a rule the groups are either family parties or composed of only one sex. The dressing rooms are under the esplanade, and the bathers walk through the crowds in the tents down to the ocean. Along the shore are racks of towels on which the swimmer wipes off his face, arms, and feet when he comes out. The usual bathing hours are from 10 to 12 in the morning. In the afternoon you seldom see any one in the water, but at that time and in the evening many are strolling up and down the Rambla, anxious to show their fine clothes. The crowds are worth seeing. I know of no place where one can meet so many fine-looking, well-dressed people at one time. The men look as though they had just come from the haberdasher's shop. The women wear Paris gowns, and there are scores of dresses with prices in 3 figures. There are hats that would be cheap at $50 apiece, under which one may see jewels in quantity. These Argentine girls know how to wear good clothes, and most of them are wonderfully beautiful. They have dark liquid eyes, long black hair, and clear creamy complexions. Most of them are tall and dignified, and they know how to walk. They are not bashful or backward, neither are they immodest, but they seem to be perfectly sure of themselves and able to hold their own under all circumstances. Many of them have been educated in Europe, and in culture and bearing they would easily take front rank anywhere in the world. The older people run to fat. There are gouty old men and plump dowagers who, if sold at their weight in gold, would need a Croesus for buyer. The flesh of the older women lacks solidity, and their faces are pasty. They look as though if one pressed a thumb into them the dent would stay, as in putty. The girls of the Argentine do not object to having their pictures taken. Indeed, buying snapshots of one's self and friends is a favorite pastime on the Rambla. There are a half dozen photographers who set their cameras so that they can take pictures of the crowd as it passes. Their snapshots of individuals and groups are displayed in the windows next day. One can look over a whole window containing several hundred such pictures of postcard size, and above them read the date on which they were taken. A young man can buy a picture of his sweetheart, or of any girl he would like for a sweetheart, for 45 cents, and a dozen of himself for 8 Argentine dollars. The photographing is done on speculation, the idea being that when a visitor sees a photograph of himself or his friends he will order it. The chief hours for strolling about the Rambla are just before breakfast and after dinner. By breakfast I mean the midday meal at about 1 o'clock. From 11 to 1 the esplanade is filled with hundreds of the best class of the Argentinians. The girls usually walk in groups and the young men by themselves. Now and then one sees a young dandy strutting along, looking as though he owned the whole Argentine Republic, and behind him perhaps a young married couple who have come to celebrate their honeymoon at the shore. There are many middle-aged men, all carefully dressed, moving along in groups, and now and then a family or young girls with their brothers and cousins. At the same time, the seats on the esplanade are filled with parties chatting and other parties drinking tea or enjoying the sights of the beach. The crowd is more like a great family than the stiff and staid strollers at our resorts. The people seem to know each other. The evening scenes are more beautiful than those of the morning. Mar del Plata at night is one of the gayest places in the world. The great hotel is ablaze with electricity and the Rambla is glorious. Its wide esplanade has long rows of electric lights resting like balls of fire upon the bronze columns of the balustrade. The tea rooms and the promenade are crowded with people sitting about tables. The esplanade is thronged with people strolling back and forth, and the lights from the roofs of the arcade make it as light as day. Indeed, there are no such seaside surroundings anywhere else in the world. It makes one think of what Pompeii must have been at the height of its glory. It is more like an ancient Greek temple than a part of one of the newest of the new countries of South America. The hotel life is interesting. The Bristol, where I am staying, is the most famous seaside hotel of the Argentine, with over 700 rooms and dining room and parlors so large that they would cover at least half an acre. The hotel is built in the shape of a half moon facing the Rambla. The front is walled with glass, and there is a wide promenade under cover, which at night is filled with gaily dressed people. There are dances in the ballroom, where a gypsy band plays. One may have his dinner as early as 8 o'clock, but he will find few at the tables before 9, and they do not finish dining until 10. The men all wear evening dress, while most of the women are in low neck gowns, although many also wear hats. I was surprised at the number of families, and more surprised when I thought of the cost of this life. This is a resort of the rich, or of those who are so anxious to appear so that they will starve half a year to spend a month here in style. As the prices of the hotel are $10 a day and upward per person, the estanciero with a family knows that it costs him more than the price of a fat steer for every day he stays. I pay $20 a day for myself and my stenographer, a young man of 20. We have a double-bedded room without bath, and all our water is brought to us in a pitcher. The furniture of the room would not sell for more than $50 if put up at auction in Washington. Indeed, I have to "pay through the nose," as the Englishman says. This is only one instance of the high prices of the Argentine Republic, especially of the prices at this seaside resort. Nearly everything is imported, and if any comment is made, the merchants will talk about the heavy freight rates and the duties. Shaving soap is doubled in price, and safety razors are away out of sight. Photographs are especially high. An ordinary 8x10 print, which one can buy almost anywhere in the world for 25 cents, costs here $2.50, and postcard photographs cost 40 cents. Papers, which sell for a nickel in the United States, cost 25 cents at Mar del Plata, and a 25-cent magazine costs half a dollar. The common cab fare is 50 cents, but the automobile taxicabs are comparatively cheap. All service is high. Shaves and haircuts are so expensive that it seems to me they charge by the hair, and I have just paid a manicure a rate equal to 25 cents for each nail on my hands. As I had been traveling on the estancias, my fingernails were so rough and stained that I asked the hotel porter to send me a manicure girl. He replied that there were few in the Argentine, and besides, it was hardly proper for a girl to hold a man's hand. He added, however, that there were men who made manicuring a profession, and that he would order one to come to the hotel. In due time came the manicure man. He was half an hour on the job, at the end of which he charged me 5 Argentine paper dollars, equal to about $2.50 of our money. The same service in Boston, Philadelphia, or Washington would have cost just 50 cents. Last evening I strolled into the casino and watched the gambling. 2 tables were going, and 100 men and women were sitting about them with great piles of chips before them. The chips were mother of pearl of different colors. They ranged in value from $5 to $100, and I could see that $1,000 or so changed hands at every shuffle of the cards. The croupiers, dressed in black and as sober looking as parsons, announced the results in a sing-song way that gave no indication of the amount staked on the throw, and the people took their losses and gains without demonstration. There are other gambling rooms at the different clubs. In fact, high play is a sort of national pastime of the Argentinians. End of chapter 37. Chapter 38 of The Tale of the Hemisphere, Chile and Argentina, by Frank G. Carpenter. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Argentine Railways. It may seem strange to those who think of the Argentine as a wild pasture land with scattered grain fields to learn that it has 22,000 miles of railroad. Argentina has almost 1/30th of the railway tracks of the world. Its mileage is equal to 1/10 that of all Europe and more than all the railways of Africa. Brazil is 3 times as big as Argentina, but it has only 2/3 as much track, and Chile, with its longitudinal system, has a railway mileage of only about 5,000 miles. The railways of Argentina, if joined end to end, would go 7 times across the United States from ocean to ocean, and multiplied by 12 would surpass the mileage of the United States, which has by far the greatest railway system in the world. Notwithstanding this, the Argentine railways are merely in their infancy. Most of them are long trunk lines running from one end of the country to the other. The towns are far apart, and one may ride for miles without seeing a house. A large part of Argentina is pasture land, which will some day be cut up into small farms and intensively cultivated, and which some day, too, will be gridironed with tracks like the prairie lands of the United States. The railway traffic is necessarily small in proportion to the area, but nevertheless the freight carried mounts up to millions of tons. Most of it is made up of food products going to market, and there is little traffic between cities and in the distribution of manufactured goods such as we have in the United States. Buenos Aires is the great railroad center. The volume of the traffic may be gauged by the fact that more than 500 passenger trains go out of the city every day. All the Argentine railroads together carry 40 million tons of freight a year and about 100 million passengers. Most of the railways belong to British investors. They have put something like $1,000 million into such properties, and their roads are paying dividends of 6% a year and upward. Many of them were built upon a guarantee from the government of 7%, and they have received other favors in concessions and remission of duties. All railway materials come in free, and the government is encouraging the building of new roads and the extension of old ones. Some of the suburban lines have been electrified, among them those of the Central Argentine Railway Company, which carry something like 15 million passengers a year. One of the largest railroad systems is the Buenos Aires Great Southern, connecting the capital with some of the best lands of the Argentine, going south to Bahia Blanca and tapping a large part of southern Argentina. This road has a capitalization of $250 million and a net income of about $15 million. The Southern Railway is now carrying 6 or 7 millions of livestock a year. About 1/2 of all the cattle that go to the freezing establishments come from the south. It has also a valuable summer resort traffic. It has the chief line from Buenos Aires to Mar del Plata, the fashionable seaside city of Argentina, about 250 miles away. During the season, there are afternoon express trains with parlor cars only, and 3 trains of sleeping cars that run nightly. One has to engage his sleeping accommodations some time in advance. The rates of travel are high, as is everything connected with the town of Mar del Plata. The Buenos Aires and Pacific Railway is connected with the trunk line which crosses the Andes from ocean to ocean. It takes passengers from Buenos Aires to Valparaiso, a distance of nearly 900 miles. The Chilean part of the line is short, about 700 miles of the trip across the continent being on Argentine territory. The Western Railway has constructed two tube lines, which land passengers right in the heart of Buenos Aires. In the beauty of their equipment, these tubes are superior to anything we have in New York, and in efficiency they are fully equal to any tube lines of the world. In addition, a tube has been made for freight trains. This passes under the Avenida de Mayo to the plaza of the same name, and then goes under the Calle Rivadavia and other streets serving the business parts of the city. Another important railway of Argentina is the Central. This has a capitalization of over $250,000, and its gross earnings are something like $50 million a year. It is a part of the system crossing the continent to Antofagasta in Chile. The Central has the highest gross earnings per mile of any line in Argentina and pays dividends of 6%. The railways of Argentina are generally well built. The most common gauge is 5½ feet, but there are 7,000 miles of meter gauge track. The broad gauge originated from the fact that the first line in the country was built to fit an English locomotive whose wheels were 5½ feet apart. Most of the roads have been kept at that extraordinary width. Our roads are 4 feet 8½ inches wide, or what is known as the standard gauge. The Argentine railways are ballasted with earth or clay. The question of ties is important, since there are no trees on the Great Pampas. At first steel was used in laying the railroad tracks. Later the hardwoods of the Parana and Paraguay rivers were tried. These woods will not float, and some are so heavy that a single tie will weigh 200 pounds, and so tough that spikes cannot be driven into them. Holes have to be bored for the spikes before the rails can be fastened. The quebracho, meaning axe breaker, has been generally adopted for use as ties in all parts of Argentina. Besides its weight and hardness, it has the further advantage of not rotting when set in the ground, while it petrifies under water. Quantities of this wood are sent to the United States for use in tanneries. Railroad building on the Pampas is comparatively cheap. The country is so flat that 100 miles of roadbed often needs but little grading. This is also true of parts of Patagonia, but there the dust storms are liable to cover the tracks, stopping the cars. The railroads use dust scrapers as we use snow plows. During a storm of a few years ago, it took 2,000 men to clear the track of one line. I like railway traveling in the Argentine. The fares are higher than those of our country, but the cars are good and exceedingly comfortable. The seats are wider than ours, and those of the first class are upholstered in leather. There are also chair cars and special sleeping compartments. On nearly every train tea is served in the afternoon. Most of the cars serve a table d'hote dinner at noon with soup, fish, stewed chicken, roast beef with vegetables, and ice cream, cheese, fruit, and coffee. The compartment sleeping cars are so arranged that one has all the advantages of the drawing room of our Pullman coaches. If he is alone, he can order the upper berth made up and have a good place to lie down during the day, and at the same time he has the seclusion of a private room. On some trains there is a sleeping car reserved for ladies, and on all the cars there are special compartments for smoking. The trains usually carry 110 pounds of baggage free on each ticket, all additional weight being charged for at high prices. As I usually carry several trunks, my extra baggage has sometimes cost almost as much as my ticket. The great objection to some trains is the lack of heating apparatus during the long winter journeys, where the thermometer falls and the high winds increase the cold. The two chief sources of Argentine traffic are livestock and grain. At almost any time of the year one may see long trains of cattle and sheep moving across the country. The cattle cars are better than ours. They open at the ends instead of at the sides, so that the cattle can be driven through the cars in single file from one end of the train to the other. This enables the stock to be loaded in a much shorter time than with us. The cattle are started in at one end. As soon as the first car is filled, the platform between it and the next car is raised, and the second is filled. then the platform at the end of that is raised, and so on. The unloading is equally simple. Some of the cars are double-deckers, so that many thousand animals may be carried in a train of ordinary length. Grain is usually carried in bags, and a great deal goes in open freight cars covered with tarpaulins to keep off the rain. One of the big expenses in grain export is getting the product to the railroads. Most of it is carried upon bullock carts hauled by 16 or 24 animals. The average wagon freight rate for comparatively short distances is 1.5 cents per mile per hundredweight, so that if a man's farm is 10 miles from a station, it costs him 15 cents per hundredweight to get his grain there. As a result of this, most of the wheat farms are close to the railroads, the extra carting cost eating up the profits of those far away. The labor on the Argentine railways is largely foreign. The roads are officered and managed by high-priced men from other countries. Some of the superintendents and general managers receive from $20,000 to $35,000 per year. Farther down the scale, the salaries are rapidly reduced and are seldom as large as those paid in the United States. There is a labor union of engineers and firemen known as La Fraternidad, or the Brotherhood. It is somewhat similar to the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers of the United States, and has had much to do with fixing railroad wages. More recently, the conductors, brakemen, station men, telegraph operators, and even the track gangs have organized unions also. The days are graduated by hours, the maximum working day under express orders being 12 hours, although in case of accidents or extraordinary occasions it may be longer. The road construction is done mainly by Italian and Spanish labor, the Italians doing most of the contract work. The captain of a gang takes the contract by the job or yard and is responsible for the work of his men. Upon one of the roads in Patagonia, I saw 20 gangs of 10 men each laying tracks. They were paid so much per mile. They carried their tents with them and were supplied with food from a provision car, a little grocery or department store on wheels, fitted with shelves upon which were bottles of liquor and packages of tobacco, groceries, and clothes. It had a storekeeper, furnished by the company, and its goods were sold at reasonable rates. Among the chief articles of consumption was the native wine, without which the men will not work. This was sold at a few cents a bottle. End of chapter 38. Chapter 39 of The Tale of the Hemisphere, Chile and Argentina, by Frank G. Carpenter. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Building a New Empire. Bahia Blanca is the New Orleans of the Argentine Republic. It is the metropolis of the south, and all of the country below, down to Cape Horn, lies tributary. Naturally, it is a great railroad center, with iron tracks going out like the veins of a leaf, and the terminal point for half a dozen projected routes across the Andes to Chile. The town has grown from a village of less than 2,000 to nearly 100,000, and promises to be one of the greatest of South American ports. Sometimes called the Liverpool of the Argentine, Bahia Blanca might be dubbed the Minneapolis as well. Its imports and exports amount to tens of $1,000,000 a year, and its flour mills and grain elevators are among the wonders of the continent. The elevators have electric conveyors by which the grain can be loaded into a large number of steamers at one time, and on the docks are electric cranes and other facilities for handling cargoes. The town has one of the largest wool warehouses of the world, covering more than 10 acres, with a storage capacity of over 10 million pounds. There are immigrant hotels and employment bureaus and other facilities for developing the enormous area feeding to this port. Southern Argentina is an empire in itself. These frontier lands at the lower end of the continent are to a large extent unexplored and form an important part of the backwoods of the Argentine. This great republic is so little known to our people that it is difficult for them to realize its extent. The country is as long as a straight line drawn from New York to El Paso, or from London to Constantinople, and at its widest part extends about as far as from New York to Chicago. The republic is divided into 14 states and 10 territories, most of which are comparable in area and resources to our largest states. The territory of the Pampa is larger than Illinois, Rio Negro is as big as Kansas, Neuquén is the size of Virginia, and Chubut is larger than Utah. The territory of Santa Cruz, down in Patagonia, is as big as Nevada, and it would make 2 states the size of Illinois, while the Argentine slice of the island of Tierra del Fuego is as large as Massachusetts, and it has more good grazing land. The great region south of Bahia Blanca is one of the chief areas of new development and suggests our Far West of a generation or so ago. It is being rapidly settled. The Pampa Central, which lies west of the province of Buenos Aires, in the southern part of which Bahia Blanca is situated, once thought to be a desert, now has several millions of acres under cultivation, including 1,000,000 acres of alfalfa and more than 2,000,000 acres in wheat. It has vast pasture lands on which cattle and horses are raised. The province produces much corn and oats, and annually sells more than 3,000,000 pounds of alfalfa seed at a price averaging about 50 cents per pound. The capital is Santa Rosa, a typical Pampa town of 7,000 inhabitants. I have seen something of the territories of the Rio Negro and the Neuquén. The latter will be opened up by the projected trunk lines which will cross the continent from Bahia Blanca to the Pacific, connecting this region with Lower Chile and making a short route from ocean to ocean. The railroad has been built as far as the town of Neuquén, the capital of the territory, and is being pushed toward the Andes. This road passes through a country much like Arizona and New Mexico. The land is practically a desert and needs irrigation or dry farming to make it thrive. The only cultivated portions are in the river valleys of the Colorado and the Negro, and the principal vegetation is sagebrush and scrub. About the only animals to be seen are guanacos and rabbits, and the chief birds are ostriches, which are found almost everywhere in the South American desert. Farther west there are many sheep in the valleys and on the mountains wherever the many green spots occur. Lake Nahuel-Haupi, a beautiful sheet of water surrounded by pine-covered hills, is 150 miles long and in some places more than 1,500 feet deep. Its fjords are like those of Norway, and Mount Tronador, with its snows and glaciers, is magnificent. Undoubtedly this picturesque spot will become a tourist resort. On one of the islands in the lake, a wealthy family has a colony cutting the enormous amount of valuable timber, for which purpose they hold a 99-year lease from the government. Almost all southern Patagonia is more or less suited to sheep raising. It is said that one can start on the mainland north of the Strait of Magellan and travel to Buenos Aires, stopping every night at the house of a farmer. There are sheep stations wherever there is water, and the sheep feed on the bushes and the scanty grass of the pampas. Two of the most important territories of Argentine Patagonia are Rio Negro and Chubut. Both of these run from the boundary of Chile to the Atlantic, and both have rich lands that can be made available for farming by the Rio Negro and the Rio Chubut. Rio Negro is especially fitted for fruit growing, and its irrigated vineyards produce more than 1,000,000 pounds of grapes and 75,000 gallons of wine every year. The Rio Negro country has an almost incredibly rich soil, but these tempting regions are subject to ruinous floods alternating with equally ruinous droughts. The irrigation projects carried out by the railroads for the national government have reclaimed and made productive a great area, where every crop known to the temperate zone can be grown in Californian abundance. The Chubut territory has many rich valleys, and its mountain slopes are well fitted for grazing. It has sheep and cattle by millions. Petroleum has been found, but has been little exploited. The government is taking up the matter and has issued bonds to get the requisite capital for developing the industry. The whole province has long been considered an unprofitable member of the Argentine family. Its early Welsh settlement was puritanic in its religious bigotry and more than puritanic in its obstinate isolation. Only recently have these people been willing to sell their land to any foreigner, by which they meant Argentinians as well as people of other nationalities, or to allow intermarriage with any but those of their own or British blood. The estimated population of Shubat is barely 1 person to 10 square miles. The capital of the territory is Rawson, situated on the coast near the mouth of the river Shubat, and the chief port is Madryn, on a little gulf not far from the peninsula Valdez. Rawson has a weekly newspaper published in Welsh, and the colonists speak Welsh, English, and Spanish. The town has a football club and cricket and tennis clubs. The province of Santa Cruz, just below Shubat and extending down to the Strait of Magellan, produces millions of pounds of wool per annum, and there are packing houses at the port of Gallegos, where hundreds of thousands of sheep are slaughtered every year. It is one of the largest territories of Argentina, bigger than our state of Colorado. Its eastern boundary is the Atlantic, and the coast is bleak and desolate. The land rises from the ocean and goes back to the Andes in a series of terraces. The southern portion has many fenced ranches and numbers of sheep. In the region of the Camerons alone there are 250,000, and there are many large proprietors, mainly British, who seem to enjoy life in this out-of-the-world spot. There are also large sheep farms along the Rio Gallegos, one with 100,000 acres and 40,000 sheep, and another 4 times as large, which has 60,000 sheep. The sheep are generally of the Falkland and Romney Marsh breeds, crossed with Merinos. They are big, weighing from 140 to 220 pounds. Their wool is famous. It is short and thick, protecting the animals against the cold winters. Some of the fleeces weigh as much as 8 and 10 pounds. Santa Cruz has 3 ports. One is Desado, at the mouth of the Desado River, another Santa Cruz, at the mouth of the Chico River, and the third, Gallegos, at the mouth of the Gallegos River. Santa Cruz has only a few hundred houses built around a little harbor backed by hills. The houses are of wood and sheet iron, and some of them have been imported knocked down from Europe. The place is the site of a fish hatchery modeled after those of the United States, the fish being sent out to all parts of the Republic. Gallegos, the capital of this territory, was named after the pilot on one of Magellan's ships, which called there at the time the strait was discovered, about A.D. 1520. There are regular steamers from Bahia Blanca to the Strait of Magellan, and once a month there is a vessel to Tierra del Fuego. The ship skirts the eastern side of the island and goes about its southern boundary from Beagle Channel to Ushuaia. The voyage lasts about 45 days, and the fare is just about $100. The ships call at all of the ports along the coast of Patagonia and terminate the voyage at Ushuaia. Ushuaia is 1,670 miles south of Buenos Aires, 100 miles or so south of the Strait of Magellan, and lies more than 1,000 miles farther south than the Cape of Good Hope at the tip of Africa. The town is a convict settlement and has a large prison for habitual criminals. The penitentiary has a sawmill and also workshops for locksmiths, carpenters, and shoemakers. It has a foundry, a printing office, and a bakery, and there is a quarry nearby where building stone is got out for shipment to the north. The prisoners do the work of the community. They make the streets, build the houses, and operate a power plant which furnishes electric lights. This prison colony at Ushuaia is the southernmost settlement of the world where any white men live the year round. With it, I end the story of my travels in these lands that form the tale of the hemisphere. The end. End of chapter 39. End of The Tale of the Hemisphere, Chile and Argentina by Frank G. Carpenter.